Hi, and welcome to Hack Your Career. I'm Keith Wilson, Director of Cybersecurity Education for AttackIQ. In this live stream, we are taking a look at all sorts of careers in cybersecurity, and we're going to do that by sharing the stories of the people that have had those careers. Today's guest is author, blogger, streamer, and award-winning public speaker. You may recognize her from the We Hack Purple podcast. Please join me in welcoming Tanya Janca. Tanya,
Hi,
welcome.
Keith. Hi.
Nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me on. I really got into that boppy beat where you start the music. I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So we actually, we used that music as kind of same sort of thing, like waiting intro music for our Academy Live that we were doing, our virtual classes and stuff like that. And we had so many comments on how cool it was that when we started this show, we were like, well, that has to be the intro music for this show. It's so catchy, that video game music. I love it.
Nice.
Well, Tanya, we're happy to have you on. We've got an audience of ours that I'm sure has questions for you, and I'm sure you've talked to your audience too as well, and they may even have some questions for you as well. So I want to encourage anybody that's watching the stream, please ask your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get around to answering them. But first, I'm going to start with some of my own questions for Tanya. Let's look at the beginning where you started, right? And it looks like you got your start as a programmer and made the switch to application security. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what did that transition look like? Was it this major shift or was it pretty easy?
It took a few years. Basically, I was a programmer, and then I became the lead programmer, and then I became kind of the lead of a bunch of teams. And I decided that management was not for me. So I went back down to lead programmer, and I was in the federal Canadian government. And I have also learned that being a manager in the government is not for me. Being a manager, turns out I'm pretty good at it, but not in the federal government. There's like more restrictions, and you don't get to hire your staff, and you're not supposed to ever fire anyone, even if they really, really, really deserve it. So it turns out private industry is a lot better because then, there's actual accountability occasionally. So life goes a lot better, and being able to pick your own staff is like pretty awesome. But anyway, so I was like, I don't want to be a manager anymore. And, I've been a lead programmer for like 10 years or something. And I was like, I really gotta, I still liked it, but I was like, that's a lot. Like, I don't want to retire. I've like, a lot more time that I'm going to be working. And so I met an ethical hacker. So he was a pen tester where I worked, and we were both also musicians. So not only was I a programmer, but I would play music in bars all over the city, like several times a month. I go to music festivals in other cities and stuff like that. And so he was in a band. I was in a band. Obviously, we became friends. Our bands have to play together, of course. And so one day I went to his office and I said, so my band wrote this song called Mandatory Dance Party, and we want to make this mobile app. And the mobile app is going to be like, if two of you have it installed and you get close to each other, it'll go beep, 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 mandatory dance party.
What
and then they both have to dance.
I want to pause on that. That's a great idea. And I'm sure anybody that's tuning in never thought, I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to a podcast on cybersecurity careers and hear about an app called Mandatory Dance Party. I love it, by the way. I think it's awesome. And I think it's great that not only you had a song and you're like, how can we make this better? I know. Put an app around it. Yeah.
We've got an app for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And so I was like, how so this was years ago. I'm like, how phones, if you shake it a certain way, it could tell. So whoever's phone shakes the most, that's going to be the winner. And then at the end of the song, it like says who the winner is. And then they just both go back to their lives. And so I'm like, do you want to help me make this app? He's like, hells yeah. And so, so then we became friends, and we didn't end up building an app. Instead, he's like, want to see me hack stuff? I'm like, yes, obviously. And then after a year and a half, he's like, okay, I said I was never going to mentor anyone again, but I want to be your professional mentor. And I was like, did I ask at some point? He's like, you're going to be a great hacker. You're going to be so good. You got to stop doing what you're doing. Like, there's this whole world of new things for you to learn. I think you're going to love it. And so I became his apprentice for a year, and then I graduated from his little program, and I could like pew pew really well at that point. And then meanwhile, in
So
my day job,
you kind of built up some pen testing skills at that
yeah,
as
yeah,
you were still working as a programmer, correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
As
and
a lead programmer.
yes, and
Yeah.
so then I ended up working at another governmental organization, and basically like they run the elections for Canada. So I know that in the United States they have many different groups that help run the elections, but in Canada we've had one group called Elections Canada that runs the entire election across the entire country every time we have one. So it's just one governing body. And
Mhm.
so I was leading a bunch of their programmers, and they were awesome. There's such a great place to work. It sounds weird, but like people who work in elections tend to just love their jobs and feel really passionately about democracy. And some government
I can
jobs, people are like,
understand that.
yeah, some government jobs people feel a bit less. They're like, we write policies, or like we regulate this thing no one cares about. But everyone at elections is like, yeah, democracy. So, so I was leading a team there, and then I just kept reporting stuff to the security team, and I kept talking to them and being annoying. And I was like, I'll fix the security bug. I'll hire the pen tester. I'll do this. And so they're like, so we have a space on our team, and we need to hire someone. And I'm like, and then they hired me to the team. And then I did really well because I'd already worked in tech almost, I don't know, like 18, 19 years at that point. So very quickly I became the CISO, and I ended up doing all the security across the country for the election in 2015. And I
Awesome.
managed incidents and did all the things, and they taught me so much.
I'm
And
sure.
then, yeah, then I moved on and I got a full-time pen testing job. And then after a while, I was like, you know what, pen testing, so pen testers, it's like a secret. And since you make an attack simulation tool, you might get this, but there's a secret that after a few years, it can get discouraging, because you show up at this place, you do this beautiful, amazing, thorough testing, and you give them this report, and they're like, yes, we're going to fix this. And then a year later, they bring you back, and you're like, you did nothing. Why?
Yeah.
You're hurting my feelings. I'm trying to help you secure your app. You didn't fix any of the things I found. Why? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
a lot of pen testers that have done it like 5 or more years start, but apparently I felt that immediately. I was like, this is so discouraging. So I just started going and talking to all the devs. I just go to their desk and be like, hey man, I found something. Can we talk about it? I'm like, want me to show you how to fix it? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, this is how you can make sure this doesn't happen again. And so I would spend all this time chatting with the devs, and I would like do threat modeling with them. And my boss was like, Tanya, your job is to go and destroy their app and then come back, and then we send you somewhere else. And I'm like, la 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 la, doing
You were
AppSec
taking
for
the time
everyone.
you were taking the time to teach the developers then, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just going, here's a problem, fix it. You're going, well, here's a problem. Here's the fix for it. Here's what I can do. Like, if you leave this here, here's the nasty stuff
Yeah.
I can do, and
Yeah.
here's what, like, you're actually taking the time. I think that's great. You're taking the time to do that outreach, because what that's going to do is lower the amount of work you have to do incrementally, right? Because as you're teaching them, they're able to help themselves. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Thank you. My boss didn't agree. He's like, why are you taking so long? You really, really are very slow, Tanya. Yeah. So then I got a job in AppSec, and I was like, this is where I belong.
Mhm. So I'm curious, what was it that made, I hear a lot of great things about your journey, and that's just a piece of your journey that we're talking about. We're just talking about your
Yeah.
transition from program to cyber, right? That's just the beginning. But I'm curious, what was there one specific thing that made security enticing or interesting to you? What was it that made you go, oh yeah, that's for me, I got to do that. That's really cool.
I'd actually had a bunch of run-ins with security teams that had gone not well as a programmer. So briefly, a year and a half, I did anti-terrorism activities for Canada. So obviously I can't elaborate a lot, but I
Sure.
helped prevent stuff that's bad. And I had to interact with the security team a lot because you're handling top secret evidence and other things. And I found that it was very frictiony.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, you just keep saying no all the time. You're not helping me get my job done here, guys. And so then again, at another place, I more friction with the security team. And so I kept having like not awesome experiences. And then when I worked at this place called the Treasury Board, so at first we were having the friction, and then they decided, I guess, as a team, we're going to do security differently. And so this woman named Alicia comes to my desk, and I'll never forget her because she like changed my mind in many ways. She's like, I'm Alicia, and I am your security person. I'm going to follow you throughout your project. And whenever you need a security thing, I will get it for you. And if you have a question, I will find the answer for you. We're on a journey together. And she's like, here's a book. And she put the Microsoft Secure SDLC in. Boom. I remember that loud sound still. And she's like, but yo, you need something? I'm your person. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I ended up just asking her 1,000 questions, and she did not get super annoyed with me, or she didn't act annoyed with me. I'm not sure. Either she's a great actress or she actually was very patient. Because I just asked her everything.
You got this other view of the security department then, because up until that point, you'd been hearing, you saw them as the Department of No, as people often call them, right?
Yes.
And then you saw this company that had a different approach to security, and it was more enablement and services based, right? Where they're going, we get it. We get security can be a pain. Here's your personal security Sherpa that's going to navigate you through this. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure I was understanding that correctly.
Apparently it's called the partnership model. And so then she introduced me to the person that became my professional mentor. She's like, I think you're going to like this guy. You both like music. I like music. He's really cool. And so then he did a talk for my team where he hacked into one of our web apps using SQL injection. And I was like, I must know about this. And he's like, cool, I'll tell you.
Teach me this sorcery.
And then I joined OWASP, and 3 months later, I was one of their chapter leaders. And then one of them became my professional mentor. And I just kept learning more and more from newer people, and then sharing what I learned with other people that were kind of, like as you start your journey, you start to learn things. And so people ahead of me kept teaching me, and people behind me, I'm like, guess what I learned? Yeah. And it worked out, I guess you could say, very, very well.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned something that I wanted to ask you about too. And that's, you spent time volunteering with OWASP. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did with them and how that has affected your career?
Okay. So OWASP stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. They were founded in 2001, and it was a bunch of people who were quite concerned that web apps were very, very ownable. They're very insecure. It's very easy to break into them. And so they started kind of like a club, and then it grew and it grew. Now we have over 300 chapters around the world. We have live events, which right now, because of the pandemic, are online. But previously, they would have 2 or 3 international events that move around the planet. Then we have all these chapters where they have local events. And then we also have projects. And I started an OWASP project with my friend, Nikki Becker. And so I started with a chapter. And so I joined my local chapter in Ottawa, and there's this awesome person named Sharif Kusa, who also became one of my professional mentors. And he was the leader. And there was about 100, 150 people part of our group. And after a year of me going to every event and being like super pumped and excited, he's like, you know what, Tanya? I don't know how to say this, but you're the only woman. Like every month, you're the only one. There's that other lady who shows up once a year. And he's like, and I wish there were more women. I don't know how to say it. I don't mean to be weird, but it feels weird they're not here. And I was like, we should do something about it. We should go to other meetups, invite them to our meetup. And he's like, I can't be a dude and go to a meetup and say, I wish there were more chicks in OWASP. He's like, I don't know how to do that and not seem creepy.
He does have a point, right?
Yeah. He's like, I want us to be more diverse. I want everyone here. And so I went and started speaking at every other software developer type of meetup. I'm like, hi, I'm Tanya. Let's hack some apps. And then I'd be like, come to my meetup. It's awesome.
So you kind of worked as an ambassador then, almost, for OWASP to other groups.
Yeah, so we basically added a 0 to the end of our number of people. We went from 100, 150 to over 1,000 in 1 year.
Awesome.
And then we built like a bigger volunteer team. So now there's a whole bunch of people that run that chapter, like a big team of people. And they made it so they started encouraging first-time speakers, and they started doing, workshops and other teaching events. And it became less like a meetup and more like a community of people who like each other and can't wait to see each other each month. And it was just, yeah, it was great. So I did that
That's
for
awesome.
5 years until I moved to the West Coast. And then I went to start one here. And they told me, actually, there's 2 other people. So me and a friend here, we're going to start one. And they're like, last week, these 2 guys wrote us and they're starting one. So we all went together and we're like, yay, this is awesome.
That's
New
great.
friends.
You get
And then the
to
pandemic
start
happened.
all over again.
Yeah, but the pandemic happened basically. So we planned our event for April 2020 and we're like getting up to it. And then so we're going to have to reboot it once we're allowed to have group events and we know it's safe. But yeah, at least I made 2 new friends.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like you've got the experience too from before, right? Of how to build a chapter. I think that it'll be pretty repeatable for you to do again. So that's awesome. I mean, has there been anything specific from OWASP where you can be like, yeah, that alone, that benefit alone is a reason to join OWASP. Whether it's a piece of knowledge that you gain there or something that you did there where you're like, because I was able to do that, I was able to, take an incremental step in my career. Was there anything like that happened while you were there or while you were volunteering with OWASP?
I've met every single one of my professional mentors through OWASP except the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually have several people that I can call upon for different things. So now that I run a startup, I have mentors that are good at startups. And before, when I was a pen tester, I had mentors that were pen testers. And so it's kind of, if you're going to change what you're doing, you need a different person to help guide you.
Yeah. So huge impact on your career then is what it sounds like.
Yes. I also started an open source project with OWASP called OWASP DevSlop. So think of sloppy DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an education project. And so basically my friend Nikki and I wanted to learn, like, how the heck do you pen test a DevOps app? How do you like do stuff? How do you do AppSec and DevOps? And this was years and years ago when there was not very much information about this at all. So we're like, let's make so she made a microservices app. We added some stuff to it, and then we just start smashing it. And then we're like, let's do a workshop and show people this is us smashing it. And this is how you could do better. And then also, did you see this? Smash, which is super fun. And we started traveling the world together doing these workshops. And she's just like, you can speak on your own. You're good at this. And I was like, I don't know. And yeah, so she helped me a lot.
It sounds like you found a little bit of a passion for education then.
Yes. Yeah. And then this other woman joined us named Nancy Garishe, and she works at GitHub now as a dev advocate. Surprise! I'm like, oh, that seems such a natural career progression. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say I'm seeing a common thread run through all of this, but even with that common thread, it's allowed you to do so much.
Oh yeah, no, being a developer advocate, to me, it's like the job that is the funnest, if that makes sense. Like being a CEO, it's like, I am powerful, I can make decisions. It's like, oh my God, so much paperwork. But when you're a dev advocate, you get to build things and break things and then show people all the things you learned. And then people tell you stuff and then you can learn more stuff. And I really enjoy learning. And the best way for some of us to learn is to teach it to someone else, if that makes sense. And I'm definitely one of those. So I'll teach it to a junior staff member, or I'll teach it to one of the people I mentor, and then I'll teach it to someone else. And I'm like, I think I can write a talk about this now. I think I know enough.
Yeah, I've always said that that's one of the best ways to solidify knowledge is to teach it back to somebody. In fact, I make the people on my team, whenever they learn something new, if there's an opportunity for somebody else on my team to learn from them, I will tell them, okay, go teach it back to this person now, just to make sure that you've got a handle on it. Yeah, I'm a huge advocate, and you know something, go teach somebody about it to see where your gaps are. So I think that's great. And we talked about having that common thread too. So I guess kind of a natural question from that is, do you believe this is still a good way to make the transition into security for developers, kind of the same way that you did? Or is there a different route that's better now?
I feel like my way was like the slowest possible way. It took several years. I also feel like, so I did many, many, many hours outside of work on it. And I could do that because I was single and didn't have children at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people have significant others. They have mini humans that depend on them for snacks and other important things. And so they can't just spend all of their time after work working on these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there has to be a better way. So, I run an academy, right? And so
I do.
part of why I created an online community and academy was I wanted to make education on these topics more accessible. I wanted to make them cheaper. I wanted to make it so that people for whom English isn't their first language, that they could read the subtitles or we could add translations for them. So the reason why I started We Hack Purple was specifically because I wanted to try to make a better bridge. Because for application security specifically, there wasn't really a book that you could read that was about that. Like there's two books that are pretty darn good. One by Laura Bell, and it's like securing agile development and specifically like things you can do in an agile thing. And there's one by Julian, I'm going to slaughter his last name. I'm sorry, Julian Viamar. That's about like securing DevOps. But there wasn't one like, this is AppSec and this is how you go and do some.
Okay. So there was no operationalizing piece of it then. Like, this is how you do, this is workflow, day in the life. Got it.
Yeah.
Of application security devs.
Yes.
So you mentioned We Hack Purple. Tell me a little bit more about We Hack Purple. What is it? We talked about educational platform academy. What is it that you guys do there? What are some of the things that you teach?
So We Hack Purple is a small Canadian company that's half startup, half services. And so I go in and teach for enterprises all the time. And we make most of our money from that. And then we also have an online academy with much, much cheaper prices than enterprise, where you can take on-demand courses. And so we have a full AppSec Foundations program. So you take all 3 courses, you read the book, you have to pass the little tests, and then you get a certification. And it's not industry recognized like some of the other ones, but it shows like I put in a lot of work. I took all these courses and I know how to do a certain amount of stuff.
Right.
And then we have secure coding, and then we have some stuff on Azure, but Azure changed its entire interface last month. And now it's like we have to refilm or something. I'm like, damn it. But anyway, that's the problem with cloud.
So it sounds like you're learning kind of the same thing that I've been learning too. And that's technology updates, whether you want it to or not, particularly technology that's out of your control, which is great unless you've taught a class on it. Then you've got to go back and redo parts of that class too. And Bev, who's one of the alternative hosts on the show, and she's our cybersecurity education manager. She's in the middle of helping me with that right now too. So she can feel your pain of going back and being like, oh man, now we got to update this. Yeah, it's a huge task, but it's got to be done.
We also have an online community, and it's free. So at first, basically, I'm starting my own company. I bootstrapped the whole thing. And so what I did was I was like, you can read my blogs if you'll pay $7 a month. And so I published a lot publicly, but some of them I just kept internally. And before you know it, my bills were paid by that. But then the rest of We Hack Purple actually started making real money. So I was like, oh, I don't need this. I don't need this anymore. So we've made the Academy free in 2021. And then it has grown. So we have around 1,500 people, and we have a whole big volunteer team. So basically, I lose money on it every month, but I don't care because you can do that when you're a CEO. I am like, it's marketing. People are like, that's not marketing. Anyway.
I happen to agree with you. We have AttackIQ Academy, and we don't charge a single cent for any of the classes there.
Yeah.
The reason that I'm able to get funding for that is because our board understands this is marketing. Like teaching people how, getting people educated on the theory around the product that your company sells is marketing, and it's totally important. So
Yeah.
anybody who tells you that education has no place in marketing probably doesn't belong in marketing.
Yeah. Well, we've sort of changed it so it's a bit more like an online OWASP chapter. Like I've copied a lot of the things I really like from that community. So I like lots of different community members give talks. So this week we have a community member who's going to host a panel, and then we have 4 community members who are going to speak, and they're all going to discuss how to get buy-in from software developers when you're like, listen, I found this bug. And they're like, listen, I have a giant deadline due on Friday and I don't have time for extra work. I'm already working overtime. And like, how do you get to that end? Or I found 500 bugs. How many can we get fixed? So the idea of like getting buy-in and convincing people to get on your AppSec train, so to speak. And so, yeah, having events with community members, like getting them to speak for the first time and encouraging basically more active participation in our industry is part of what we're trying to do there. And so people will publish their own articles there sometimes. And it's exciting because I didn't have a place where I could do that. Does that make sense? Like, because putting a blog on the internet with the whole world watching is a bit intense.
Yeah.
It's like, what if everyone hates it? Oh my gosh. But we're like this smaller place. So if you want to give a talk for the first time, 20 or 30 people will show up, but everyone's going to be super nice to you because they know you're part of their community. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it almost sounds like you took a lot of the stuff that you liked from OWASP and the experience that you had with OWASP and figured out a way to sort of virtualize it a bit, right? I wouldn't say you've gone as far as to start up this whole OWASP chapter online, but it sounds like you've taken a lot of aspects for that and found ways to integrate that into the We Hack Purple site and the community and stuff like that. So that's great.
This year we're going to do in-person meetups.
Oh, that's
awesome.
awesome.
So we're going to have one at the end of March, and it's going to be our first one ever, and it's going to be in New York City, and it's just so exciting. Even if it's only going to be, 5 or 6 of us, I'm like, oh my gosh, I chat with you all the time. This is awesome.
Well, I love that you encourage the public speaking too. I don't see enough engineers that are comfortable with public speaking, and I think anybody can be, I won't say comfortable with public speaking, but they can tolerate public speaking if they practice enough. The hard part is doing the first couple practices. So it's great that you give people that opportunity to be like, okay, this is a nice, warm, easy audience that's small and they're only here to help you, and applaud.
Yes. My first talk that wasn't at work was for my OWASP chapter. And I remember I was standing there and I was so nervous, and I'm in Ottawa and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm definitely going to die. And this nice guy named Alex is part of our community. He's like, why are you nervous? He's like, don't you understand? We literally love you. Like, you're our mascot. You're our ambassador. You're the person like that always greets us and high fives us or hugs us every week. Like, every single one of us wants you to succeed. He's like, if you got up there and drooled on yourself, we'd probably tell you that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I felt a lot
you might
less
not get
scared.
the standing ovation. They may sit down and applaud, but they're still going to be, they're still there for you.
Yeah. And they were so wonderful. And I'd made a mistake. And one of them was like, what about this? Do you think maybe that? I'm like, oh yeah, what he said. And he's like, yeah, they're just so wonderful. All of them were so great. And then I was like, okay, maybe I could speak in front of another audience who doesn't know me, and maybe they could be as kind. And it turns out, like, a secret of public speaking is that everyone wants you to do a good job. Right. Everyone there like came to hear what you have to say and wants it to be good. No one's like, I'm going to go to this conference and I hope the whole thing sucks. Yeah. That's not a thing. And so
I hope I go listen to this I hope this talk for the next hour and a half of my life is boring and miserable and wrong. Like, nobody hopes for that.
Yeah. Once I learned that the audience is like interested in what you have to say, and they're like, yeah, let's do this, I just felt so much better. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I remember a piece of advice that was given to me when I did my first public speaking gig was be the smartest person in the room. And kind of the first part that was missing to that was whether you are or you aren't, be the smartest person in the room, right? Because
feel like it.
Yeah, if you just tell yourself before you go up, I am the smartest person in this room. I mean, don't say it into the microphone, but tell it, say it to yourself first. Nobody in the audience is going to disagree with you. all the public speaking, maybe it's happened to you, but have you ever done public speaking where somebody in the audience has raised their hand and they go, excuse me, that was horrible. Like that doesn't happen.
No, I've had a couple people where they gave me a bit of a hard time.
Yeah.
But I used to play punk rock music. So I was a folk singer for a long time, but then I was in all these punk rock bands, including like post-hardcore, power pop, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've like literally kicked someone off a stage. I've literally like been like, oh yeah. Like,
so, you've gotten over that fear in other ways.
Yeah. Like I remember telling someone once, I'm like, hey, shh. Because he was making some sort of monologue during question period. And I was like, sit down. It's my turn to talk, not your turn. That was not a question. That was a monologue. And he's like, well, I'm like, nope, shut it. People came here to see me talk. That's why I'm on the stage. People did not come here to hear a speech from you. So please sit down. We will talk about this after, but you're done now. And he's like that. I'm like, zip. And everyone's like, I can't believe you did that. I'm like, he was talking over a minute. And he was just like lecturing me. And it wasn't even relevant. No. Yeah. But that is very, very rare. I would say I've done 200 plus presentations or like more. And so that's pretty darn rare. Maybe like 3 times I've had to tell an audience member, you're done now, sit down.
Yeah. I want to ask
organizers should be the ones doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. That's really that's the truth too, is, we're talking about kind of here, I don't want to get too far off topic, but we're talking about worrying about people and public speaking. Yeah. The reality is if you're doing public speaking at an event, even if it's a small event, the organizer is going to be the one responsible for kicking people out if they're a pain.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. I'm super strict.
Yeah.
No one is allowed being rude to our guests ever.
Right. And most people aren't, which is great. I mean, the security community, for the most part, are great people that want everybody to succeed. They want to help everybody wants to help each other. They want to learn from each other. So, with all this being said, because we're doing a lot of talking about public speaking, do you consider that an asset for you? Aside from the fact that you do public speaking professionally, get paid for it, take that out of it. If you were just to apply the skills that you take for public speaking to your normal work, everyday work, do you consider any of that an asset, and why?
I definitely consider an asset because quite often, when I was a dev, I was just like, you program it like this. And then all the other devs would be like, yep, that's how I would do it. And so I didn't face a lot of battles. Does that make sense? Like as a dev, I was like, how about we do this? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, cool. Mm-hmm. But with security, I would be saying, okay, so I recognize that you bought a bunch of printers that only can do, SSL version 2. And that's very nice, but everyone is using TLS now. And I'm not okay with our super sensitive documents going out over the internet like that. So we need to make a compromise. And they're like, well, we don't have money for that. And I'm like, well, let's find some or whatever. And I remember that battle was just about how they just didn't want to reprogram that part because it was super hard. And I was like, well, let's find an easier way to do it, et cetera. And so I find I have to battle a lot more. And so I'll be in the room and I'll be the only security person. And so with public speaking and with specifically like performing music in front of people who are drunk quite often, like say what you want, right? A lot of the people that go to bars or music festivals, they drink, and that's okay. That's okay. But they're a little bit more loose-tongued when they've been drinking. It's given me a lot more confidence to say, actually, I'm not finished speaking yet. May I finish? Okay, thank you. Because sometimes people will just try to bulldoze over you. I'm like, the person that speaks the loudest is not the one that's going to win. And that's also, I professionally scream. So, because I used to be in like these hardcore bands where I would literally scream. And I remember someone was about to start yelling at me. And I was like, oh, are we going to yell now? Because I can yell with literally the best of them. I can definitely be louder than you. I literally practice this multiple times per week. So if you want to yell, we can yell. But you're not going to be the loudest. So do you still want to do that or what? And then everyone calms down.
Well, public speaking and music quite literally helped you find your voice, helped you build confidence that you've carried throughout everything else.
Yeah. And also sometimes when to be quiet too, like to recognize that someone else is super nervous and they want to say something. And I'm like, oh, wait, I should shut up because that person is feeling nervous because the room has lots of people. And I'm recognizing my old self before I started doing all of that. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I'm like, did you have a comment that you wanted to share? And they're like, yeah, so this. And that voice is important too, right? So it's helped me see like, oh, wait, maybe I should shut it for a minute.
Yeah, it's helped you. It's good that you've gone back to reflect to where you've gotten to a point to where you're like, you know what, I think I got this public speaking thing pretty good now.
Yeah.
I understand all the different pieces that go into it, and I understand what it looks like to be nervous, to be on the other side of this, to not feel in. So let me see if I can identify that and help those people, which I think that's great. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely a thing that happened when I got older and more mature. Like the loudest voice in the room shouldn't make the decision. The decision should be made on what everyone in the room thinks is the best idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat. Do we want to very briefly define these two things for this nice person? Or
let's see if I can go back up to the
chat. It says, hello, team. I need to gain some proper knowledge in SQL injection, attacks, and cross-site scripting. Okay. I could, in 2 minutes, give a little bit on that if you want.
Yeah. If you want, sure. I mean, that's not really the show. We don't do the technical stuff. But if you can do it in 2 minutes, let's see if we can answer this guy's question in 2 minutes.
Okay, both of these attacks are against web apps only. And basically, you're tricking something to execute your code as the attacker. That's what you're doing. So injection means or SQL injection means there's an SQL database somewhere, and someone has put something into your app, let's say in like a search field, that is actually some SQL code, and they have tricked your database into executing it, which is terrifying. And cross-site scripting is where you put some JavaScript in somewhere, and you've tricked the person's browser into executing it against them. So the victim, it's their own browser running JavaScript that is the attacker's JavaScript and attacking them. And both of them are terrifying, and you absolutely need to fix it. If you have a scanner, pick that up. Absolutely, you must fix it. Those are terrifying.
Do you teach more about those sort of techniques in your training?
Yeah, we go a bit deeper. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's a great commercial for the training then. So if Tanya's quick explanation there didn't do it for you, recommend you go and look at the We Hack Purple training. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Kareen. Kareen is our head of talent acquisition at AttackIQ. Always love having you on the show, Kareen, so that you can give tips and advice to those out there applying and looking for jobs. What are you going to talk to us about this week?
Awesome. So first and foremost, that was a great feature from Tanya. So thank you, Tanya, for being on Hack Your Career today. I was really struck by how inspiring Tanya's journey was. And, big shout out to We Hack Purple. Lots of love there. But honestly, what I got from that personally was just to be fearless and to believe in yourself. And of course, always showcase what makes you unique. So putting yourself out there, I recommend that everyone get started today. And the mantra that I'm embracing after that great feature is embrace career creativity and seek growth always. So for Tanya, I was definitely struck by her contagious attraction for growth and new learning frontiers. And it seems like she was never satisfied with complacency, going from being a champion programmer for 10 years, moving on to leadership roles in different contexts, whether that was the federal government, private industry, or where she is today as a CEO and entrepreneur. So very inspiring journey. And again, she's even now opening the door for others by being a mentor and guide with We Hack Purple. So for full circle moment, the probing thought I'll leave you all with today is consider how you can make a difference, not just for yourself, but also for other people in the larger world around us. Think about what your next growth path is going to be, and it might surprise you. So again, just reminding everyone to be fearless, to believe in yourself, and always showcase what makes you unique. And that's it for today.
Awesome. Kareen, thank you so much. Tanya, thank you for being on. Tanya, before I ask you this question, I'm going to let you know you're on mute. Okay, cool. You're off mute.
Okay. Thank you.
So is there anything that you wanted to plug? Tell us about where can people find more about you and We Hack Purple?
So if you go to wehackpurple.com, you can join our community. And I absolutely want to invite every person. It's totally free. We don't have any upsells. It's just community.
Awesome.
You can find me at shehackspurple.ca because I'm Canadian. You probably heard me say out at some point. Maybe check out, if you want to learn about application security specifically, maybe check out my book, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, which is available at all the places where people sell books. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. And for continued learning as well, highly, highly, highly recommend, probably because I run it, the AttackIQ Academy. You can go there by going to academy.attackiq.com. Always free training on cybersecurity. You know, so good you're going to think that it's pirated software or whatever. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in again. Thank you, Kareen. Thank you, Tanya, for being our guest. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys again in 2 more weeks on Hack Your Career. Have a great one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.